Hello, and welcome to the Angus Pete Show. Views and opinions are strictly those of the presenters and their guests and should not be taken as advice. Goodness knows, we're not qualified to advise you about anything. Side effects may include mild amusement and occasional enlightenment with feelings of embarrassment, apathy, disappointment, and pity.
Welcome to episode 17. I'm Angus Pete.
And I'm Pete Brown, and we are the Angus and Pete Show.
The place where you can listen to two guys chatting about that riveting world of customer engagement.
You know, customer engagement, otherwise known as call centre, contact centre, customer service, customer experience, CX, or whatever else you're calling it this week.
If you want to know more about us, check us out on LinkedIn.
So, Angus, what's in the postbag this week?
You know, we had a couple of people contact us and talk to us. First one was Mo Nawaz from the UK. He listened to episode 16, business case or basket case, and agreed with what we were talking about. His comment was, great insight, understanding stakeholder dynamics and anticipating potential objections are indeed essential for navigating those crucial boardroom decisions.
So he was the guy who spends quite a lot of time mentoring and advising in the boardroom. That was important feedback. So Mo, that's very much appreciated. Do you remember last week when we were speaking about Teleperformance's decision to use AI to neutralise the accents of their Indian agents?
Yeah, no, I do remember that. The moral dilemma. We
had quite a few people getting in touch, some seeing the benefits, others not so much. But one person in particular stood out for me, Danny Wareham, DANNYWAREHAM, Danny Wareham. And he's a psychologist and a mentor and a speaker, and he's active in the CX space. And he wrote an article in response to the Teleperformance announcement that they were using AI to do what they were doing. And this article discusses the bias and prejudices behind that story and whether AI is actually fixing or fueling the problem. And I would recommend that you go and have a read of this article because it's actually very good. So if you go onto LinkedIn and you search Danny Wareham, again, that's DANNY, Wareham, WAREHAM. And if you just use the search phrase, when accents are erased, with his name, it will take you there. Yeah, I think he sounded like an interesting guy. So, yeah, well worth a read.
Well, go and read that. But Pete, let's get on with the show. This week, we've got our first guest on the Angus and Pete Show for you. We handpick our guests because they are experts in their field, and they've got deep knowledge and experience that our CX and contact center industry listeners want to hear.
Yeah, I think it's also worth saying that they join us on the show in their own right. Their views are their own. They're not here to represent any organisation or any third party. And crucially, no payments or inducements are made either way.
Just like the rest of the podcast.
Absolutely.
So first off, spoiler alert. If you've not listened to episode 1, A is for Analysts, then go back and listen before you continue.
Our guest today is Steve. He's been the person to go to for insights and information about what goes on with our technology and the businesses that provide it. He's been an analyst. He's been around for a long time. You could say that Steve has CX and contact center in his blood.
That was very subtle, Pete. We had a chance to sit down with Steve a few days ago, and it was really interesting having a chat about what he thought about the role of the analyst community. And he also gave us some real insider views of what life is really like as an analyst and also how they operate. So I think let's go and have a listen to what he had to say for himself.
CX Insider, your inside track.
So, Steve, kick us off with a little bit of your professional background. Tell us what you do. Tell us what you've done.
Thank you, Pete. Yeah, well, it goes back a long way, so I had to really think about this one because I'm quite old. And it's coming on 35 years since I first came across an ACD. I was a sales engineer at Mercury Communications, and the customer was Dixon Stores Group. And they had this novel idea of taking orders for products from a catalogue. Oh, wow. Great idea. Over the phone.
Steve, you might need to explain to the audience what Dixon's is, because I
I
think
know. Yeah, this is a common theme actually, because all the companies I mentioned, they don't exist anymore. Now, I'm not responsible for that. I swear it's not me that's responsible for that. But yeah, so Dixon's was then. I think they're now known as Currys, aren't they? Is it Currys now? So they kind of rebranded, but they were in Hemel Hempstead, and so they had an ACD. And the other thing was, it was a Centrex ACD, the first cloud service, right? So, so that was my first. That's something like 35 years ago that I got into customer service and the call center business. And so, as a sales engineer, I was always on our product group about things we didn't have. Kept on badgering them, saying, we need this, we need that, we need better reporting. Customers are asking for this. And in the end, they said to me, well, if you think you know what you're doing, you come and join us. So I did. I became a product manager. This is where I found how difficult it is to launch products, to get funding, to get commitment, to develop, and all those sorts of things. And so, eventually I left Mercury, and I went to a company called NTL. I did some more Centrex product management at NTL. Not so much on the call center side. That was more in the sort of voice services. We were just starting to experiment with unified messaging, and that was a Centigram platform. And that company doesn't exist anymore either. So it's only because I'm really old. That's the reason why I don't exist anymore.
Actually, I think I'm feeling quite good about this, because you're actually a little bit older than me, which is excellent, because I'm becoming very conscious of how old I am.
So then I got this call from a headhunter, a company called, should I say the name because it doesn't exist anymore? Rockwell. And that's actually where I first met Pete. I was a product marketing manager at Rockwell, and I did that for a few years as well.
And I was a sales guy who kept going to product marketing saying, can we have this? Can we have that?
That's right,
I've lost that order because your product isn't very good, Steve. Can we sort this out, please?
So that was, Steve, that was your first fail. You didn't manage to pull him across from being a gobby salesperson to being a product manager, which you should have done.
Yeah, you're probably right. You would have found out how difficult it is to launch products then.
Sales is really easy, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, totally.
Walk in the park, isn't it, compared to...
And but who wants service? Yeah, so after... And then I think it was the start of 2000s. It was that bubble that burst, the Y2K bubble that burst, and I became an analyst. I joined a company called Gartner that does still exist.
Oh, okay. One of the few companies that you haven't taken down.
I haven't taken down. And so I joined Gartner, and I expected to be an analyst for 5 years. The plan was to go into Gartner, learn tons, work with lots of end users, and do a bit of consulting and really grow my knowledge in things, and then go back into the industry again. Take all that and go back into the industry as some loudmouth, over-opinionated, arrogant person. Anyway, as I found, I could do that. I could be that at Gartner. So why did I need to sort of move anywhere?
Yeah, and as I recall, you did a bloody good job of that as well.
I did, yeah, that's right, yeah. So I've been in Gartner for about 5 years. I was based in the UK. And I had this opportunity to do a bit of kind of personal development, and Gartner was just opening up their Spanish office. And so I said, I'll go down there for a couple of years and do a bit of sales support and help develop the business down there, as well as being an arrogant arsehole. And so I was only going to do that for 2 years. And I was going to come back to the UK. So I rented my house out down to the last teaspoon. And here we are, year 19 in Spain.
Wow.
I'm now fully embedded in Spanish culture. I'm married to a Spaniard. My son is Spanish, or half Spanish at least. And my house is still rented, but the teaspoons are long gone. So I did that for 23 years. So that's a very, very long time. You're adding all these years up, you think, how old is this guy? He should be retired already. And then I just over a year, in fact, almost a year ago next week, I joined a market-leading contact center as a service cloud provider. So we're back in the cloud space again. I work for Five9. I work in the marketing department. I'm head of market intelligence and evangelism for Five9. And I've been here now just almost a year.
And have you toned down the arrogance, or is that still a requirement?
I think I've had to. I mean, I was saying the other day that obviously I try, I've been around a while. I like to impart my knowledge, and I try to help people and give support. And sometimes I find that difficult. And what I have to do now is be tactful and diplomatic. As you can probably imagine, I'm struggling with this. This is very difficult for me to be tactful and diplomatic. The fact that I'm still here after a year means it must be working in some form or another, learning this new skill of tact and diplomacy.
So if you think about it, when you were an analyst, what did your working day look like? And then what made you really get up in the morning? What was your favorite thing about it?
As an analyst?
Yeah, because we always watched this from the outside.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Got to speak to you on probably, I can count it, three different occasions on inquiry calls, and then was part of the team that put a rubber duck on your bed.
I think for our listeners, what we should say here, because that could be interpreted in all sorts of inappropriate ways, that if you refer back to episode 1, which we're going to ask Steve about in a little minute anyway, there is mention of a rubber duck. So maybe you should pause now, go and listen to episode 1 and come back again, but to avoid getting the wrong idea about the relationship between Angus and Steve.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So, yeah. What I think the reason I stayed 23 years at Gartner was I learnt tons. I got, I thought I knew a lot before I joined. I knew plenty, but I learned so much more because there are all these people in the company, just the thought leadership. And we used to spend a lot of time collaborating, mostly obviously on calls and things. And it was audio calls initially. And then, of course, eventually we went through to video and so on. But just tons and tons of collaboration. And also in those early days, we did do quite a lot of travel. So I used to meet up with my colleagues at analyst events or symposiums or whatever. And so we would spend time, we work together. And I just loved that, just noodling over ideas and this sort of the water cooler moment on steroids, if you like. So as a result, we produced lots of work. We were able to test that with our colleagues. Do you think this would work? What's wrong with this? And so it's like launching products in a way, but these were sort of, research and advice that we created. And then, of course, we shared that. In the main, the reason that vendors probably still do hate me, but at least my current employer, I hope, doesn't hate me too much. But was because I had this belief that I was there to ensure that my end user clients spent their money wisely. And they were listening to us because they wanted advice on that.
So end user clients, just for our listeners, we talk about sellers and buyers. So You're talking about the people that are buying this whole CX contact center technology piece.
Absolutely, yeah.
So your reference point in terms of who you're really serving, who you're really looking out for, was the buying community rather than the selling community. Although obviously the selling community are an important part of what you did.
Absolutely right. Yes. Yeah, that's right. On the vendor side, I working with vendors, I tried to give a insight into this is what we're hearing, this is what we think as a result. As you can imagine, a lot of the time, really we were there because they wanted to sell to us. They wanted to influence us, and that kind of gets a little bit sort of stale, and after a while you get a bit, bored, and it's a bit irritating. But no, so my primary role was to advise these end users. And I got to meet lots of them. I spoke with them daily. I did, I don't know how many thousands of calls I did over 23 years, but I did 600 to 800 a year, I think, something in that sort of order. So multiple calls each day, mostly with end user organizations. And it's fascinating what they would reveal to us. And obviously we were under NDA with every single client that we had. Geez, I could have been a rich man if I could have taken some of that knowledge and used it on the stock market. But anyway, there we are. It was just a great environment to be in, this sort of on the outside consultant, shall we say.
So you can't leave us hanging. What type of things were you stunned to hear end user customers saying?
I think the funniest thing was hearing from a tech provider that would say, this is one of our best customers. And when speaking with the customer, say, we can't stand them, we're getting rid of them, you need to help us get there. Working with a very, very large government body that said, we're going to halve the number of staff in our service organisation over the next 3 years. It's going to create absolute havoc. This cannot get out. And even through to more recently during the pandemic, a company that said, we're about to launch a product for COVID. And I did watch their stock price just, oh my God, I couldn't do anything with it. And that's one of the things about being an analyst. you may hate them, but at least I think the analysts at Gartner, there's a lot of work that goes into ensuring that they are impartial, that they are truly honest in what they do and what they say. So that was really important to me. That was my brand. Even up until weeks before I knew I was going to leave Gartner, I'd signed a contract with my current employer. I was due to do a strategic session with one of their competitors, and I just pulled out and said I'm not going to do it because I think that would look bad on the company. That vendor would have gone ape shit. It's just you let us share all this strategic, and it would look bad on me as well. And I probably care more about my personal brand. I want people to see me as arrogant but honest, honestly arrogant.
The nice arrogant bloke.
That's the one.
So you've admitted that you actually listened to episode 1 of the Angus and Pete Show, A's for Analyst. So you must be that one stat listener that we've got then on the So I thank you for that. What did you think about that episode? What was your reaction to that episode when you listened to it?
It was very good. I think there was a bit of bias from your experiences putting into that, and it was very focused on Gartner, right? I mean, there's tons of reports out there. Gartner is, I can absolutely guarantee you, it is absolutely for sure not pay to play. Yeah. And I sometimes get embroiled in conversations in LinkedIn now that I'm no longer at Gartner. At Gartner, we weren't allowed to do that. We were not allowed to engage. We would get the social media team banging on us, and you're not allowed to engage with you. Just say nothing. And that was difficult. That's really difficult. But so I had my first experience of being on the vendor side, inputting into a Magic Quadrant. And it's hard work. I never appreciated, I said this on LinkedIn, I never appreciated the amount of effort that goes into producing this. I think on the Gartner side, I kind of thought, well, it's just like responding to an RFP, right? So get your RFP materials out and put all the content into the form. That was pretty naive of me, to be honest.
Yeah, it
was very naive thinking about it. So another learning curve that you go through. So I think there were a lot of valid points in there. I think I've still got the yellow duck. It's upstairs in the bathroom. I remember that well, Angus, but it was a good session, right?
It was.
So for me, in 2002, Avaya, for an analyst event, Avaya took me to the opening game of the World Cup in South Korea. It was really, really nice. And back in those days, Gartner allowed it. But within the next 4 years, the next time Avaya was sponsoring the 2006 World Cup in Germany, Gartner analysts could go to the event, but they weren't allowed to participate in the fun. So that would be perceived as being influenced too much. And in fact, now even the Gartner policy on analyst events is we will pay. We will pay for your flight and your accommodations to demonstrate that we are not influenced.
Do you think there still is an element of pay to play now generally in the analyst / commentator / influencer industry?
Oh, well, when you look at the analyst firms that only make their money from vendors, and that was one of the other things. I think it was, I'm just trying to think, David Rossiter, who, I don't know if he still is, he was at Vodafone, he was in the AI, and he wrote a great...
He's still knocking about.
He's still knocking about. So he wrote this great piece on LinkedIn. He said, everyone says, you shouldn't be taking the vendor dollar. And he said, well, if that was the case, Gartner would still be in business because vendor represents about 30% of their total revenue, whereas nearly all the other companies would have disappeared. So it was a really important piece to make. So I think that there is some bias, and you look at some of the positioning, you think, would they be a client by any chance? And having said that, there are a lot of independent analysts out there. I've met a lot since leaving Gartner. They're really good people. They really know their stuff. They're great at what they do. 99% of their revenue comes from vendors, but that doesn't mean they're all biased towards vendors. There are some out there that call it as it is. There are also some that if you don't pay them any money, they won't say nice things about you and things like that. So that's one of the things. You think about analyst relations, there are two core elements. One is influence. You want to influence the analysts that are potentially advising your customers and prospects, right? That's influence. And there's amplification. getting an analyst community to say great things about you and to promote you. So any analyst with strong Twitter followers, LinkedIn, social media presence and things, they can be used for amplification. Of course, the challenge there is they could amplify bad things as well as
exactly
good things.
So if you were going to put it in a nutshell, what did we get right and what did we get wrong in that first episode? Be as arrogant as you like.
I don't know. It had that element of seething annoyance about Gartner.
We spoke about this afterwards, and I did say to Angus, it could be perceived that we were giving Gartner a hard time. But Angus said at the time, and this is me basically blaming Angus for us airing the thing in the first place. Angus said at the time, actually, everyone knows Gartner.
Yeah.
And everyone, and for good or bad, everyone knows the magic quadrant, right? So you can say that, and people will know it. So it's sort of that ubiquitous, is it a vacuum cleaner or is it a Hoover? Is it an analyst or is it a Gartner? It's that sort of thing. So that's our defence for that one. Steve, move on, please.
So, and I think also, had I not been now on the other side, on the dark side, back in the vendor community, I probably would have been more dismissive of that session. So I can see that both sides, there were a lot of truths in there. I think the interesting is some of the analysts got, as you pointed out, got taken to very, very nice locations.
Yeah.
For the events and things. In reality, I think it's true that it influences them in terms of what they amplify through Twitter and LinkedIn and so on. Are they influencing anyone? Not really. That's my perspective. So I think, there is that sort of balancing act to do there, really. But no, I think overall, you made some good points. I think that you have to understand the process of things like the Magic Quadrant and everything that goes through there to truly understand how they reach their conclusions and things like that. I think I definitely perceive it. It was a giggle for me, but there absolutely are some truths in there. And I agree with you that, there isn't actually a need to take analysts to really exotic destinations. You only do that if you've got too much money to spend. If you do that, if those vendors that do that, they will never get a Gartner analyst. Okay, and if they want Gartner analysts to influence, want them to be there, they will never get them because Gartner won't pay those sorts of fees. But if you ran the event in your head office, then they would pay for that, so you would get a better representation. And I saw some amazing events that have been run over the last couple of years. And of course, as an analyst, I was seething because I couldn't attend any of them.
There's also something, everybody's focused on MQs because everybody knows them. They get a lot of airtime. How relevant are those going to be moving forward with the advent of AI and all the technology moving so fast?
Well, I think like a lot of these things, artificial intelligence and certainly generative, it can be used to authenticate some of the decisions potentially, but I don't think it's going to replace them. Things like Gartner has peer insights, okay, where customers will rate the vendor. Now, that is used by analysts, but it's still the analyst opinion. I think there's a big interesting challenge here. You've got to bear in mind that Gartner does sometimes get sued for Magic Quadrants. Not very often, but occasionally a vendor will go all out and say, we're going to sue you because you're defaming our position. It's not true. We are the market leader, and we will not be able to sell as a result of that. And so when it goes to court, despite all of the analysis and research that goes into producing an MQ, Gartner's defense will be it's our opinion, and we're entitled to our opinion. And it always gets thrown out. So if you put technology into that, then potentially you can say it's not opinion. This is a business model that's been created that gives an output, and it's wrong. And of course, at that point, you'd have to sort of start investigating into, well, how do you create that, and so on. Saying the opinion is much easier.
So if you think about technology in another way, I think we said in episode 1 that potentially analyst output reports and whatnot, given everything we've spoken about in terms of the time and the complexity of actually getting the thing stood up in the first place, by definition, it's a rear view mirror. There's a retrospective view of life. Given how fast the development of CX and contact center technology is going, and let's face it, I've been in it almost as long as you have, Steve. Yeah. It is rapid, and it's being driven by vendors, and it's also being expected by buyers. Literally a week lag. You're out of date in a week. The pace at which this stuff's going. How does that relatively slow, thorough process keep up with that pace and just stay current?
I think that's a very, 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 very important point. And so, I mean, there are these, Gartner's evolving, especially and I know I'm talking about Gartner because I know them, but there's these new emerging quadrants that they're producing, and they're producing those, planning to produce them every few weeks, I think. And those are they're using more data that's been created to put those positions in place. And Gartner has become a kind of a challenge to itself, I suppose, in that when I first started producing Magic Quadrants, we could get one done in 2.5, 3 months. Now the process is 8 months. And that's because they've added policy process. There's a huge department in Gartner called methodologies, which is responsible for just creating as much... Sorry, anyone from methodologies, I apologize. For creating as much work as possible, right? They're always changing things. And every time we went around a Magic Quadrant iteration, there was a new step in the process. And it always seemed to add time. It didn't take anything away. So I absolutely agree with you that when you start the process and the eventual publication, it is always out of date. So I think that is absolutely a challenge which they would need to address. But, also bear in mind that the positioning, the vision and execution is only partly about product. It's one of 7 or 8 categories.
Yeah.
It's about business strategy. Do they know where they're going? How financially viable are they? And what's their geographic strategy? So there's a lot of things in there that aren't just about product. So, I think you'd look at the MQ in terms of, is this the right company I should be working with? Are they still going to be around in 5 years' time? As opposed to sort of, is this the right technology? I think that requires the daily conversations. I think you're absolutely right. Things like large language models, which are emerging every few weeks, when you build a set of capabilities to take advantage of generative, you need to leave that you create something which says you can swap this out as you want. It's not, oh my goodness,
plug and play.
OpenAI. And so now we've got to rebuild it for DeepSeek or the next one, and so on. So I think, there's a level of agnosticity, if you like, that you need in order to be able to create those. But coming back to the Gartner piece, I think that's why, the analyst inquiry was always very, very important. Being able to speak to someone that had many, many years of experience in the industry. And I still use some of that today in my conversations. I am a subscriber to Gartner. I get advice from them and I look at their reports, etc., in the customer service space. And I found that very useful. I worked with practitioners, people that ran service centers. So not just the technologists, but the people that ran those businesses as well. When you put all that together, it's an immense amount of talent that you can draw on, you can take advantage of. So, that side of it, I still think is great. Anytime there's an evaluation, you would not be true to yourself as a supplier if you didn't think you have one of the best products out there, the best strategies, and so on.
We're going to move on to the bit of the show now where we grant you 3 things, Steve. And these 3 things, they could be 3 wishes for the CX industry. They could be 3 bits of advice that you may have given your younger self, as you were going through your career, taking down one company after another, it sounds. What 3 pieces of advice would you give to your younger self? Or actually, maybe, what 3 pieces of advice would you give to someone just joining our industry now? Or maybe someone who's in it who needs to buck their ideas up. So, thinking generally, what 3 things would you like to bring to the party?
Well, I'm going to be awkward because I'm going to pick one of each.
That's fine. Okay. No one said you couldn't mix and match. On the Angus and Pete show, we are ultimately flexible and accommodating.
Very good. So I think, so on the first one, CX wishes, or I tell you what, we've reached a point in the industry where we've got tons and tons of technology. And as suppliers, we are ready and able to create the seamless journey. Right? We're there. We can do this. The biggest challenge I see is for organizations to think about convergence. So when I was an analyst, I would talk to different departments, all of which touch the customer in some sort of form of service support. Most of my inquiries with the customer service team, they were using contact center technologies and so on. But there was also the social media team, formed out of marketing. And they were using separate technologies, and they were managing their experiences in that group. And they have each of these have product managers that are responsible for, and they have a budget and a team for managing the technology that supports our companies. And then digital, some of that merged into the website team were responsible for the chatbots that would answer questions on the website. And so as a result, hey ho, what a surprise, we have disconnected experiences, and we all hate it as consumers. Bringing all that together, occasionally I would speak to a chief customer officer or someone with a CXO in their title, and they would have in that room, or the virtual room on WebEx, they would have responsible people from every single one of those departments. They've brought them all together to talk about the future. You could cut the atmosphere on those calls with a knife, because someone was going to lose their job. Someone was not going to be the head honcho. They'd be reporting to somebody else. So now we're talking about personal ambitions in terms of where people want to be. There was one conversation, I remember quite clearly, a client who, they were the product manager for quality, just agent quality. That's all they did. But it was a massive company that had a huge budget, and they were a big variant user. And we started talking about it. So they said, well, I'm paying too much for call recording. The call recording is way too expensive. I said, well, who provides your contact center platform? I said, are you Avaya? No, I think we're in the cloud. I said, well, you could talk to them because cloud storage is included as part of the cloud service. I said, so, you wouldn't have to pay variant for storage. And then we started talking a bit further, and the light bulb suddenly came on that this person thought, yeah, but that other cloud platform can do everything that I do. And then, oh my goodness, well, why am I required? And so this sort of, well, I'm going to stick to what I'm doing. Oh, I think I'll. So the outcome there was definitely so. So I think that, it's a very elongated explanation. I think we need to think about people convergence. That's really important. I think the technology's there, and that will be the next step down. Will be to start saying, okay, who are we going to consolidate with, and it's not going to come down to a single platform, but definitely can reduce down the number of platforms.
Okay, so number one, wish for the industry.
Yeah,
start pulling it together from an operational perspective and make it nice and seamless and joined up. What's the next one?
Next one is what would I tell myself? My earlier years. I wish I had been a little more enthusiastic about technology. We can do anything with technology. We can achieve anything we want to. And this kind of came home to me when I was listening to one of Steve Jobs earlier, when in his YouTube videos, where he talked about getting down to this tablet. So we can't make a tablet, but we're going to start out with, it was the first Macintosh. We've made it. It fits in this box and it costs $5,000. And next thing we'll put it on your desk, and it only costs $2,000. Then we'll get down to putting it in your pocket. And that's the reality, isn't it? I think if I'd had a more open perspective of what technology can achieve, then I could have been more ambitious, maybe, in terms of some of the things in my early days, in terms of some of the things I could have achieved myself in my career. And we're in the tech industry; we can fix anything. It's just a matter of time and investment to get a computer from being something that sits in a massive, great big room right the way down to something that sits on your desk.
To that point, I hear myself saying this a lot to sales teams and on the seller side, and also buyers in operational and technical environments. Yeah. Technology is no longer the issue. Technology is no longer the pinch point. It is about the whole, what are we going to do with it and why are we going to do it? Yeah. That's really what it comes down to. So I absolutely agree with that. And if I'd have known that at the beginning of my sales career, that would have been a game changer. So what's number 3?
Number 3 is my advice to the industry, or people starting out, I guess, and people in the industry today. So this is where I get a little bit patriotic. If we're on video, I'll be waving a Union Jack. So let's just think about this. Brits. The first call center, ACD, was not invented by Rockwell, an American company. It was GEC. It was the PABX ACD that was installed by BT in Birmingham Press back in 1965. Right? So the Brits formed the first ACD. The first social media site was not Facebook. It was Friends Reunited that started in 2000.
Yep.
That's right.
And then the other one is I forget the name of it. The first programmable computer was not invented in the US. It was in Bletchley Park. It was Colossus and the Alan Turing developments. So, and then let's just apply that to our industry, right? Cisco acquired all of its digital capabilities for a British-based company called IMI. Vonage acquired its call center capabilities from a British company called New Voice Media. 8x8 required all their contact center capabilities from a British company called DXI. You can see where I'm going here, right?
Yeah.
Be bolder, and be bolder in terms as investors. Invest in those companies that don't just get acquired in an early stage by American companies, but are able to grow in terms of their valuation and invest more to enable them to.
Hey, Steve, I remember there was a great little British company. The name evades me at the moment. Began with an R, I think. Excellent.
Here we go.
Forward-thinking, software-based contact center platform. One of the
Couldn't
first to get
spell
into
either.
the cloud.
They kept on confusing.
Yeah, had a strange,
the Roman one. The Roman one.
Strange spelling. I can't remember their name. And they were quite innovative, weren't they, at the time?
Rostrum, aren't you? Yeah.
Oh, that's the one.
That's another one, isn't it? But that was bought by a British company that was then bought by an American company, right? So you look at Europe in general, the US is one massive market, right? One currency, largely, well, not one language, that's being unfair, but one primary language. And so it's very easy to attract an enormous market. And so things grow very, very quickly there. It's also very commercial. The healthcare sector there is so different to the healthcare sector over in Europe and so on. So there's lots going for the US and the reason why these companies grow very, very quickly. But I just feel that everyone needs to be bolder. The UK is a nation of inventors, innovative ideas. We all need to be bolder about what we can achieve. And I think that goes everything from people who invest in British companies through to people that work in them, CEOs that have ambitions to grow their business. Be bolder. And I say all this at the end of my career. I would say, that's probably coming back to me as well. I should have been bolder.
Yeah.
In terms of what I've done. So I think, that's there's so much going on here. We're so good at this. And I say that as a very patriotic British person living in Spain for the last 20 years.
I think it's a really good piece of advice for, I think, anybody starting out in the industry right now. Be bold.
We're coming to the end of our time here. I have genuinely enjoyed this. I was dreading this, Steve, to be honest with you. But it's turned out to be an almost pleasurable experience.
Almost pleasurable.
Yeah. So I just want to say, you're a busy guy. Absolute thanks for coming on, for supporting us, for being very candid, very honest, with a little bit of arrogance, because that's always a nice thing to have. So yeah, I just want to say from Pete, thank you very much.
Yeah, from Angus, thanks very much for the time. I think it's been a really good chat.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
CX Insider, your inside track.
Well, that was great, wasn't it? I really enjoyed that. What were the highlights for you, Angus?
A couple of them. I think that the first one was that it was interesting that he said the analysts are actually focused on serving the end user clients over the vendors.
Yeah.
And the vendors were only sort of 30% of the activity.
Yeah.
And the second one for me was that technology is not the main issue. How it gets applied and understanding that is really fundamental.
And that was, for me, that was really good to hear from someone who spent a lot of time on the other side of the fence, if you will, because we've been saying that repeatedly in our podcasts over the last few months, right? It's not about the technology. It's all about the what you do, the why you do, the how you do.
Yeah, it's not about the features. Not about the features. And that kind of follows on. Right now, it's the convergence of people and operations and departments that organizations need to focus on if they want to deliver a seamless customer experience.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me that he brought up the personal agenda thing again, which, again, we've spoken about. The convergence of people and their agendas is probably more important now when it comes to joining up customer experiences than the technology. I also like the way that we spoke about the fact that a lot of these reports can get out of date very quickly. And it's also good to hear that analysts recognise that and are starting to look at different ways that they can speed up their responses and be a lot more current with the information that they're putting out. Because after all, people are making big, important decisions with this stuff. I really like the whole bit about, his 3 wishes.
Yeah, those were good. They were really good.
I like those. So the first one was all about getting those personal agendas in business aligned so that customer journeys are aligned. The whole thing around advice to the younger generation about being more interested in technology, more accepting of what technology can do. But that whole thing about being bold, I love those examples that he gave about, the UK being at the cutting edge of a lot of this stuff that we do. And we forget about that. We take it for granted. So, it's something to be proud of, and it's definitely something to continue.
What surprised me, it was absolutely not what I was expecting.
That whole conversation we had about UK businesses being acquired by US businesses and the reasons why. Let's just remember, we're a nation of inventors in the UK. We're a nation of innovators, and we need to continue to do that and lead from the front. That's what makes it great. I think it was also amusing to hear that potentially he got it wrong when he was an analyst. He really didn't understand the amount of work, the amount of grief, the amount of aggravation that goes with getting a dot in a box on one of his magic quadrants. And it was interesting for me to hear that now he's on the dark side. He's had some first-hand experience of what that is. And maybe he's had to reappraise his views on what it takes to be a decent vendor and make a decent response to analyst requirements.
It's not just go and get your RFP library and quickly cut and paste.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Absolutely great. And good to hear it from him.
I think overall, it certainly reinforced the fact that we pretty much got it right in episode 1.
Yeah, I think we did. Why wouldn't we, Angus? We're always right, aren't we?
We never make mistakes.
There's only one crime, and that's getting caught. Anyway, that was a great start to the CX Insider series. I think that's what we're going to call it, right? The CX Insider series. We've got a lot more to come, actually. We've got a short list of guests, which is getting longer by the day. So look out for the next CX Insider. They'll be coming our way soon.
We'll be back next time with episode 18.
Follow the Angus and Pete Show page on LinkedIn for news and notifications. Message us directly. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you want us to talk about. Tell us how we're doing. And please keep that postbag bulging.
And the show is available on all your favorite podcast platforms. So please listen, like, subscribe, and share to help us spread the word and feed our egos. Pete.
Angus.
Just because we're doing an Insider series episode, that does not mean you get away without doing Joke of the Week.
Well, I knew you were going to say that, so I prepared a little something. So a Gartner analyst goes to the doctors and he's got high blood pressure. And the doctor says, goodness, your stress levels are off the charts. What's causing this? And the analyst says, well, I spend all day making magic quadrants. Unfortunately, my own health is in the bottom left-hand corner.
That is so bad, it's good.
It is awful, isn't it? Anyway, cheers, Angus.
Cheers, Pete.
Thanks for tuning in to the Angus and Pete Show. Remember, it's based on the personal views and opinions of the hosts and their guests. If you're feeling aggrieved or litigious, take a chill pill. There's already enough stress in the world. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform for more episodes. We'll see you next time. Oh, and tell your friends.